Taco Bell. Founded in 1960s California by some white dude, this is a fast food chain best known for its $5 meal boxes, Mountain Dew Ritos, and for some reason, being ranked as the #1 Mexican restaurant in the United States. And as someone living in Canada, that last bit really concerns me. But today we are not talking about cinnamon twists or burrito supremes. Not real ones anyways. If you're catching where I'm going with this, we're talking about virtual ones. This here is Taco Bell, the Tasty Temple Challenge for MS-DOS, a game that was released by Taco Bell as something that you could get in a kid's meal around the year 2000. I've actually known about its existence since about 2016 though. See, back then when I first started this channel, my big YouTube channel branding thing involved tacos. It was weird, I know. I'm glad I moved past that too. But during that time, I found out about this game and I was like, oh, I have a taco aesthetic on YouTube. This is a Taco Bell game. Why don't I cover it? So I bought my copy for $5 on eBay, expecting it to be excellently weird and retro and hopefully at least decently good, and it proceeded to sit on a shelf for about 4 years. But that's fine though, because the game is awful and I can hardly find any info out about it. So instead of doing a showcase style video today or a documentary style deep dive, I'm doing something a little different. I'm James, and this is Stuff We Play, home of everything weird and retro. Today's video, Taco Bell, the Tasty Temple Challenge, explored through the 5 stages of grief. Initially, I was really excited to jump into this game. After all, the premise is interesting and the packaging is unassuming enough. Now, before we go on and unbox my copy of the game, I should mention that this game, though published by Taco Bell, was developed by a company called Brand Games. They are a rather obscure developer who only seems to have been active around the tail end of the 90s. The Tasty Temple Challenge is actually just one of 3 games they ever worked on. The other 2 games were Snow Day, the Gap Kids Quest, and Mr. Pibb, the 3D interactive game, which clearly shows that they were one of the best developers in America, am I right? I tried to find any info on this game. Literally anything. Even a smidge. But I really couldn't find much at all. The only review I found of this game was from a single person on DOSGames.com, who gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. They said, and I quote, "Taco Bell apparently released this game in 2000 as a pack-in with their kids' meals. This seems quite late for a DOS-based game, but anyways, you play as Baja Bill, why not Taco Bell, and your noble quest is to explore the temple filled with product placements for Taco Bell products. Fun? Well, the game engine isn't too bad for a free game, although it was many years since Wolf 3D, Doom, and even 4 years since the release of Quake by this point, so they could have done better. Attack enemies using your Taco Bell sauce packets, and collect food for health. It's a rather short game as you might expect, with not a lot of variety. Definitely not as good as the Chex Quest promo games. This didn't fill me with a lot of hope for this game's quality, but the concept was still unique enough to grab my attention. Besides, it got 2.5 stars. That's better than 1 star, which means it must be not completely awful, right? Well, before we dive into the game, we need to go ahead and open up my copy. That's right, before making this video, my copy of the Tasty Temple Challenge was still sealed in its original packaging. I'm sure opening up now will diminish its already staggering $5 price point a bit, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make to please that YouTube algorithm. The back of the packaging displays both the Taco Bell and Brand Games logos, as well as a stern reminder that this game is intended for PCs and not Macs. Well, joke's on them, since my old school gaming PC is just an iMac running Windows 7 via boot camp. Ha, take that, Taco Bell. Anyways, upon opening it up, we get both the game on a 3.5-inch floppy disk and an instruction manual / activity book. You heard that right! Along with installation instructions, this small booklet also includes things such as a maze puzzle and a spot the difference puzzle. The only thing that complete the package would be some crayons, and perhaps the inclusion of the actual in-game controls. The disc itself is a little odd as well. On first sight, it appears very cool with its completely black design and glossy sticker on it, but it also feels rather cheap. Which I mean, makes sense, as this game quite literally came as part of a kid's meal. But still, the plastic feels somehow brittle, like if I insert the disc into my floppy drive too hard, it will crack. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and insert this into my USB floppy drive and boot this thing up. And honestly, first impressions are pretty good. The title screen has some rather nice pixel art, and the game world itself looks pretty neat on first sight. You're in the aforementioned tasty temple, using various varieties of hot sauce to shoot down snakes and scorpions. But that raises the question, what are we even doing here? The story of the Tasty Temple Challenge, according to the manual, goes as follows. Baja Bill is one hungry dude. He's part of an exploration team that has discovered the ruins of an ancient jungle civilization. Tired and hungry from a day of hacking through the jungle, Baja Bill climbs into his sleeping bag near the giant stone steps that lead up to the main temple in the ruins. In his dreams, the temple turns into a bonanza of Taco Bell food delights. He races from room to room through the temple, gobbling up as much food as he can. Tacos, nachos, gorditas, Mexican pizza, and chalupas. But there's a catch. Hiding in the nooks and crannies of the temple are poisonous jungle cobras. Just when you least expect it, they jump out and take a bite. Cover them with hot sauce, and they're goners. But if you don't move quickly, they'll give you a nasty bite. Get bitten enough times, and you'll wake from your dream before you reach the Grande Meal. Trademark. The Grande Meal. Trademark. Hot and delicious. It sits there on the top level of the ruins, waiting for you. Will you get there before you wake from your dream? Play Tasty Temple Challenge and find out. Overall, it's a simple setup that takes certain steps to avoid the wrath of angry suburban moms, such as being a dream sequence and involving hot sauce instead of actual guns. At the same time though, I feel like I'm getting a bit of heartburn just reading that story blurb. But that's okay. The game world initially looks cool and it reminds me of Doom, and despite the scorpions and snakes within looking kind of derpy, perhaps this will end up being a fun little game. Yeah, okay. That last bit was bullshit. This game is a royal pain to play. Now, I previously mentioned Doom, specifically Classic Doom, and I think it goes without saying that Doom had a pretty good control scheme, even if it may seem a little odd for today's standards. If you want, you can even just play it using a keyboard, using the arrow keys to move, strafe by holding Alt and pressing left or right, firing your weapon by pressing Control, opening doors with spacebar, and running by holding Shift. There are also options for mouse controls as well, and of course nowadays there are ways to remap controls and such. But for many a 90s kid, the controls I just mentioned were how old school vanilla Doom was experienced. Tasty Temple Challenge tries somewhat similar controls, but also f***s it up royally. I mean, the basic stuff is pretty simple to do. Movement either with the mouse or arrow keys, select your hot sauce weapon using the number keys, fire with spacebar, and toggle your map using tab. However, there is no way to use a mouse and keyboard, only one or the other. This seems odd for a game from the year 2000. For context for fans of old school PC first-person shooters, the year prior, Quake 3 had released. Now, as there's no way to map controls without external software, and no way to use a mouse for camera control, how do you think you look up or down? And actually, while we're at it, how do you think you jump? I'll give you a few seconds to think. Well, if you guessed the page up and down keys for looking up and down, and pressing the home button for jump, you're correct. Goodness, that's some dumbass control design. This is on the same level as when I played Mega Man for DOS and the jump button was mapped to the J key. Except, this is actually a bit worse to deal with. See, due to some recent personal shenanigans, the only keyboards I have on hand are sub 90% size keyboards, such as this Apple Magic keyboard here. And it just so happens that these keyboards do not contain page up, page down, or an equivalent to the home key. At this point, I was concerned. I was not wanting to go out and buy a new keyboard just to play a 20-year-old Taco Bell game, and using the on-screen keyboard for playing this thing was out of the question. I was honestly pissed. What type of dumbass, harebrained, poorly thought out bullshit was this? But I couldn't let myself get too angry. I wanted to handle this reasonably. and not like some sort of irate gamer. I had to find a proper modern solution. At this point, I took a short break to grab a London fog from a cafe and clear my mind. While I was out, I came to a realization. We live in the year 2020, and technology has come a long way since 2000. And by that, I mean I circumvented the control weirdness by using Joy to Key to just use a USB controller. I'm mostly just mentioning this here so I don't get too badly roasted in the comments for playing a Doom clone with a controller. Even if I had a functional full-size keyboard though, that doesn't stop the game design here from being hot garbage. Everything just looks the same. There's literally only 2 enemy types. There's not even any music. I will give it this though. Samey as it looks, it's all very fluid. But geez, what an absolute maze of a level. And it's a bit difficult too. I don't know what it is, but on occasion some enemies spawned right on top of me. And as I went on, I just kept dying and dying and dying. But after a while, I did feel myself starting to get somewhat better. I dove into a pool to retrieve a crowbar that let me get through certain vents. I found 2 keys that allow me to open new paths. And yes, the level was huge, but I was getting better and just getting a bit farther every time I played. Also, I was determined. Sure, the game was filled with problems. There were glitches in some places and also just outright odd design quirks. For example, if you kill an enemy, it turns into a little pile of blood-soaked dust, which still acts as a physical object. As such, if you end up killing an enemy in just the right spot, you can actually block your progression forward and have to restart the game. I think it's pretty obvious that this is not a very good experience. But I figured, even if it's not good, I gotta be able to beat at least this one level. Just the one level. Just one more try. I just gotta give it one more go. I just gotta beat this level, and I can go celebrate and get myself some actual tacos. It can't be that hard, right? Spoiler alert, it was that hard. Now before we go on, I know this step is called depression, but as someone who has dealt with depression, that's not what I began to feel here. It was more so a feeling of a hopeless sadness than a crushing wave of mental numbness, to be honest. So really this step should just be called Bad Sadness, not Depression, because I feel like that's a very inaccurate title. But anyways, Tasty Temple Challenge is deceptively simple. Find the keys, get to the goal, that's it. And yet, as I got farther and farther into this level, going through life after life, it felt like the game was starting to actively try to hinder me from beating it. After about an hour of playing, I started having control glitches. On some runs, the fire buttons would randomly stop working. On others, my directional movement would get stuck going slightly to the right, forcing me to have to hold left of my controller to try to compensate for it. And this definitely wasn't an issue with my USB controller either. I tried switching controllers and finagling with options, but the issues kept coming. Then the game started to crash on occasion. I didn't know what to do here, so I tried reinstalling it. Twice. Once from the disc again, once from a copy I found floating around online. The second time things worked decently for a bit, but then problems started up again, worse than before. On one run, the dimensions of the stage began to warp whenever I moved. It was as if my directional keys weren't so much moving me, but moving the stage around me. I'd never encountered something quite like this before, and I didn't know what to do. On the run directly before that, I'd gotten almost to the end of the stage, only to get soft-locked in a room. Apparently I needed to open a door, but despite having the required item, it just would not budge. So I reset, and then the weird warping began. And it got me thinking, what the hell is even the point? Why the hell do I need to beat this thing? And why would they make this game so shoddy? It's almost as poor as the bathrooms in the Taco Bell Long John Silver's combo restaurant in my hometown. Clearly the game doesn't want to be beaten either. It doesn't want me to progress. Maybe it's representative of life? Is that what life is? You keep trying and trying to make things better, only for your dreams to be showered by the most unassuming of things? It's awful. Just awful. Thanks a lot, Taco Bell. But then it hit me. Maybe that's the point. The game not being very good thing, not the life thing. And perhaps that's okay. I did not beat the Tasty Temple Challenge. And that's fine. I ended up looking up a walkthrough on YouTube, and it ends up that if my attempts to play the game had worked properly, it would have been over in around 20 minutes. If this game had actually cost a decent bit of money, that would have been repulsive. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a dreadful game to play, but it's not the only one of its kind. Years later, Burger King would release the likes of Sneak King and Big Bumpin'. These were Xbox games that could be gotten for $5 each with the purchase of certain meals. There's also the other titles from brand games, such as that Mr. Pibb game that I have an unhealthy desire to own. I'm sure you watching this right now may also be wanting me to mention the likes of Chex Quest, but I won't mention Chex Quest here because it's actually a good game and I will defend it to the end of the earth. Tasty Temple Challenge feels like it was made over a weekend so it could be slapped into kids' meals. And it probably was. But I mean, it makes sense. The point of games like these aren't to give unique, awesome playable experiences or provide fun budget-priced adventures with a brand-based twist. The point of this Taco Bell game was to take advantage of the massive popularity of video games as a whole so they could encourage kids to pester their parents to take them to a restaurant that, in 2019, had to recall over 2.3 million pounds of beef due to people finding metal shavings in their meals. So with that, that's it for this video on Taco Bell, the Tasty Temple Challenge for MS-DOS. Is it a good game? No. Is it something I'm glad I spent $5 on? No. Is it a cool relic from the turn of the millennium? Debatably. But if you're going through a rough time in your life and you need a game that can act as a quick pick-me-up and that's just kind of silly and stupid, is it worth checking out? No. Besides, we have Katamari for that. But regardless, I'm glad I got to take a look at this game with you today. I guess you could say I'm really glad we got to talk about it. So on that punny note, I'm feeling kind of hungry right now. But unfortunately in my part of Canada, we don't have Taco Bell. But we do have something kind of like it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Stay classy, and if you excuse me, I'm gonna grab some taco time.